While everyone else stayed home, one player showed up, and that might have just changed everything. Because this wasn't a mandatory session. No pressure, no consequences. Every quarterback on the roster had the same choice: rest, relax, stay comfortable, and most of them did. But Shedeur Sanders didn't. He walked into that building alone, laced up, and got to work like something was on the line. And maybe it was. Because in a situation where nothing is officially decided yet, moments like this don't go unnoticed. No announcement, no headline, just one decision that quietly sent a message across the entire organization. And now, people are starting to ask a different question. Is this really still a quarterback competition? Or is something already starting to shift behind the scenes? And the first thing that made this moment stand out wasn't who showed up. It was who didn't. Because when reports started coming out from that session, one detail kept repeating. Some of the biggest names in that quarterback room were nowhere to be seen. Deshaun Watson, not there. Dylan Gabriel, also not there. Now, to be fair, this wasn't a violation of any rules. These were non-mandatory sessions. Players had every right to stay away, train privately, or take time off. That's completely normal across the league. But context matters. Because when you're in a quarterback room where the starting job isn't fully locked in, decisions like that get noticed differently. This isn't a settled situation where one clear leader is just maintaining his role. This is a position that's still being evaluated, still being shaped, still being decided behind the scenes. So when multiple quarterbacks choose not to show up, and one does, it changes the perception immediately. Because now it's not just about availability, it's about intent. From the outside, it starts raising questions. Who's fully locked in right now? Who's treating this like a real opportunity? Who's trying to separate themselves before the real competition even begins? And again, nothing here confirms anything. There could be valid reasons for the absences. Training schedules, recovery plans, personal timing. There are always factors we don't see. But in a competitive environment, perception becomes part of reality. And right now, the perception is simple. One quarterback showed up when he didn't have to, and the others didn't. That's the kind of contrast that sticks. Because in football, especially at the quarterback position, small details carry weight. Coaches pay attention to them. Teammates notice them. And over time, those details start shaping how people view the situation internally. It's not about one session deciding everything, but it's about what that session represents. Effort, urgency, mindset. And when those things become visible, especially when others aren't matching them, it naturally shifts how the competition feels. Because now, it's not just about talent anymore. It's about who's acting like they want the job right now. And in that moment, only one name was part of that conversation. And this is where the difference really shows. Because it's one thing to show up. It's another thing to show up like it matters. From everything being said around that session, Shedeur Sanders didn't walk in casually. He didn't treat it like a light workout or just another off-season day. He approached it like something was on the line, even though, technically, nothing was. That's what separates this moment. Because when something is labeled non-mandatory, most players hear one thing: optional. A chance to rest, reset, and stay comfortable before things get serious. But Shedeur saw it differently. He saw opportunity. An opportunity to get extra reps. An opportunity to be around the coaches. An opportunity to build familiarity in a system that's still being shaped. And most importantly, an opportunity to separate himself. That mindset doesn't show up randomly. That comes from understanding where you are and what's at stake. Because right now, nothing is guaranteed. There's no official announcement, No locked-in starter, no clear hierarchy that's been publicly defined, which means every single rep matters more than usual. Every session becomes a chance to gain ground. And that's exactly how he approached it. While others chose comfort, he chose preparation. And that choice sends a message, whether he intended it to or not. Because coaches notice that kind of behavior immediately. They notice who's present. They notice who's engaged. They notice who's treating every opportunity like it counts. And when a player consistently shows that mindset, it builds something valuable: trust. Not the kind of trust you talk about in interviews. The kind that builds quietly through repetition. Because from a coaching perspective, reliability matters just as much as talent. You want to know that your quarterback is locked in, that he's serious, that he's going to put in the work whether anyone is watching or not. And moments like this prove exactly that. Now here's the key part. This wasn't a one-time thing. This fits a pattern. Because everything coming out around Shedeur has been pointing in the same direction. Consistent work, constant presence, steady improvement. And when that pattern keeps repeating, it stops being coincidence. It becomes identity. Which is why this moment feels bigger than just one off-season session. Because it's not about what he did that day. It's about what that decision represents. And once that kind of mindset becomes visible, it starts changing how people see the entire situation. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Because Shedeur didn't come out and say anything. No interview. No statement. No social media post trying to prove a point. But somehow, the message was still clear. Because when actions line up this cleanly, they speak for themselves. Showing up when you don't have to. Putting in work when others aren't around. Treating an optional session like it's mandatory. That tells people everything they need to know. And the people who matter most, they're watching closely. Coaches notice it first. Because from their perspective, this isn't just about one workout, it's about habits. It's about who they can rely on when the season starts, when things get tough, when preparation becomes the difference between winning and losing. And habits like this build confidence. Not hype confidence. The kind that grows over time without needing to be announced. Teammates notice it too. Because in a locker room, players don't just listen to what's said, they watch what's done. Who's putting in extra time? Who's showing consistency? Who's acting like a leader before being named one? And when that becomes visible, it starts shaping perception inside the team. Not officially, not publicly, but internally it matters. Now here where the narrative starts to shift. Because this wasn't just about effort, it was about contrast. One quarterback present, others absent. And even though there are valid reasons that could explain that, the visual difference is hard to ignore. Because in competitive situations, moments like this get remembered. Not because they decide everything, but because they add to the story. And right now, the story around Shedeur is building in a very specific direction. Work ethic, consistency, commitment, stacking up one moment at a time. And over time, those moments start to carry weight. Because when a coaching staff evaluates players, they don't just look at talent, they look at everything surrounding it. Preparation, mindset, presence. And when one player keeps checking those boxes, it creates a natural shift. Not forced, not announced, just earned. That's why this moment feels bigger than it looks. Because it wasn't loud, but it was clear. And once that kind of message is sent, it doesn't just disappear. It stays in the room. It stays in the evaluation. And eventually, it starts influencing decisions. And this is where things start to feel real. Because once a coach notices something like this, it doesn't just get ignored, it gets remembered. And from what's been said around the situation, Todd Monken didn't just acknowledge Shedeur's presence. He paid attention to it in a way that matters. Not with hype, not with over-the-top praise, but with something more important: recognition. And in the NFL, that kind of recognition carries weight. Because coaches don't hand out compliments casually, especially not in situations where roles are still being decided. Every word, every reaction, every small signal can mean something. And this felt like a signal. Because when a coach sees a player showing up early, putting in extra work, treating optional sessions like real opportunities, it tells them something about how that player is wired. It tells them this isn't just about talent. It's about mindset. And mindset is what coaches trust the most. Because talent can flash, but consistency wins jobs. Now here where it gets interesting. This isn't just any coach. Monken is stepping into a situation where he's shaping the offense, setting the tone, deciding how everything will operate moving forward. That means he's not tied to past decisions. He's not locked into any previous hierarchy. He's evaluating everything fresh. And in a fresh evaluation, moments like this matter more than people realize. Because now, instead of relying on reputation or expectations, the decision-making starts leaning toward what's being shown right now. Who's engaged? Who's improving? Who's putting in the work when nobody's forcing them to? Those are the things that build trust early. And trust is what leads to opportunity. Now, this doesn't mean the decision has already been made, but it does mean something important. The door is open. Because when a coach starts noticing a player for the right reasons, it creates momentum behind the scenes. More reps, more attention, more chances to prove something. And those chances are where everything can change. Because in a situation like this, you don't need a big announcement to know something is shifting. You just need to watch where the attention goes. And right now, that attention is starting to move. Slowly, quietly, but noticeably. Which leads to the next piece of this story. Because while this was happening, there were already signs that something bigger might be taking shape behind the scenes. And this is where things get even more interesting. Because sometimes the biggest clues aren't announced, they're shown quietly. No headlines, no official statements, just small details that start to add up. And right now, there are a few of those details that people are beginning to notice. The first one, reps. Because in football, reps tell the real story. Who's getting more time with the first unit? Who's being given chances to run full drives? Who's being trusted to handle more responsibility? Those aren't random decisions. They're controlled by the coaching staff, and they usually reflect what's happening behind the scenes. Now, reports and observations suggest that Shedeur has been getting meaningful opportunities in these sessions. Not just showing up, but actually being involved at a level that matters. And that's a signal. Because coaches don't distribute reps equally forever. At some point, they start leaning toward players they believe in. And when that shift begins, even slightly, it becomes noticeable over time. Now add this to the second signal. The number. Getting number 2 back wasn't just a branding moment. It was a subtle shift in identity. Because numbers carry meaning inside a team. They reflect roles, status, and how a player is viewed within the organization. And when a player regains a number that's clearly tied to their identity, it often signals alignment between the player and the team. It's a small detail, but not an accidental one. And when you combine that with everything else, the work ethic, the presence, The coach's recognition. The increasing reps. It starts forming a pattern. And patterns are what matter most. Because one moment doesn't decide anything, but multiple moments pointing in the same direction. That's when things start to shift. Now, to keep this grounded, nothing has been officially confirmed. There's no announcement declaring a starting quarterback. But that's not how these situations usually unfold. They don't happen all at once. They build quietly, until the decision becomes obvious. And right now, it feels like we're somewhere in the middle of that process, where the signs are there, but not everyone is fully seeing them yet. Which is why this next part matters even more. Because to really understand what's happening now, you have to look back at what he dealt with before. And this is where the narrative really starts to flip. Because if you go back and look at Shedeur's rookie season, the first impression might not seem that impressive. The offense struggled. The numbers weren't elite. There were mistakes, turnovers, missed reads, moments where things didn't connect. And for a lot of people, that was enough to form an opinion. He's not ready. He needs more time. He's not that guy yet. But here's the thing. That version of the story doesn't show the full picture. Because when you look deeper, the context changes everything. This wasn't a clean situation. The system wasn't fully stable. Protection wasn't consistent. The offense itself struggled to find rhythm. And when all of that is happening at once, it doesn't just affect performance, it affects development. Because a young quarterback depends heavily on structure. Clear routes, consistent timing, reliable protection. And when those pieces aren't in place, even talented players start to look inconsistent. That's what makes this so important. Because now, when you compare that version of Shedeur to what we're seeing today, it looks different. Not because he suddenly became a different player overnight, but because the situation around him is starting to stabilize. Now there's more structure, more clarity, more accountability across the offense. And when those things improve, the quarterback's game naturally becomes clearer too. Now you start seeing better timing, better decision-making, more confidence in how he operates. Because instead of reacting to chaos, he's playing within a system that supports him. And that's when you can actually evaluate what a player is. Not in survival mode, but in control. That's the shift happening right now. Because what looked like inconsistency before starts to look like potential that was waiting for the right environment. And once people start realizing that, the narrative changes fast. Because now, instead of questioning whether he can do it, the question becomes, what happens if he finally gets the right setup? And if that answer keeps trending in the direction it is right now, then this isn't just about improvement anymore. It's about something much bigger taking shape. And this is where everything begins to change. Because once new patterns start forming, old opinions don't hold up the same way anymore. Early on, the conversation around Shedeur was simple. Too raw. Too inconsistent. Not ready yet. That was the narrative. And for a while it stuck. But now, that same narrative is starting to crack. Because people are seeing something different. They're seeing the work ethic. They're seeing the consistency. They're seeing the way he's approaching every opportunity like it matters. And when that becomes visible, it forces a shift in how people evaluate him. Because now, it's not just about what happened in the past. It's about what's happening right now. And right now, everything is trending upward. Reports are pointing in the same direction. Observations are lining up. The small details are adding up. And when all of that starts connecting, it becomes harder to ignore. That's why even the critics are starting to hesitate. Not fully convinced, but no longer as certain as they were before. Because the gap between doubt and belief is getting smaller. And that's where momentum builds. Because once people start questioning their own doubts, the narrative begins to flip on its own. Now instead of asking, "Can he do it?" the question becomes, "What if he already is?" And that's a completely different conversation. Because now the focus shifts from potential to reality, from waiting to recognizing what's already happening. And once that shift takes place, things move fast. Because belief spreads quicker than doubt ever did. Teammates start buying in. Coaches start trusting more. Fans start paying closer attention. And suddenly, what once felt uncertain starts to feel inevitable. Now again, nothing has been officially decided. But that's not how these situations usually unfold. They don't flip overnight with one announcement. They build until the answer becomes obvious to everyone watching. And right now, it feels like we're getting closer to that point. Because when the narrative starts shifting this clearly, it usually means something real is happening underneath it. Which leads to the final question. Is this still a competition? Or has it already turned into something else? And at this point, it's hard to look at this situation the same way. Because what started as a competition doesn't really feel like one anymore. Not in the traditional sense. Because competitions are usually loud. Back and forth performances. Clear battles. Constant debate. But this has been quiet. One player consistently showing up. Stacking small wins. Building trust behind the scenes. While everything else stays uncertain. And that kind of shift doesn't need an announcement. It becomes visible through patterns, through repetition, through consistency, through moments that don't seem big on their own, but start to carry weight over time. That's what we're seeing here. Because when you put everything together, the work ethic, the presence, the coach's recognition, the increasing opportunities, the changing narrative, it all points in one direction. Not guaranteed, but clearly trending. And in the NFL, that's usually how decisions are made. Not all at once, but gradually, until the answer becomes obvious. Now, does that mean it's officially over? No, but it does mean something important. The balance has shifted, because this is no longer about waiting for a chance. It's about taking it. And right now, Shedeur Sanders looks like the one doing exactly that. Which leaves one final question. If this continues the way it is right now, if the work keeps stacking, if the trust keeps building, if the momentum keeps growing, then when the decision finally comes, will it really feel like a decision at all? Or will it just be confirming what's already been happening this entire time?